In today's fast-paced, title-obsessed society, people have become conditioned to associate their identity with their occupation. When someone asks, "Who are you?" the typical response is a job title. "I'm a doctor," "I'm a teacher," "I'm an engineer." But these are merely functions, temporary assignments that fulfill certain roles in society. They do not define the true core of a person. Identity is something far deeper than function. It is not based on what you do, it is rooted in who you are. The danger of confusing the two is that when the function changes, people often suffer an identity crisis. A man who builds his entire sense of self around being a manager might feel lost if he is suddenly laid off. A woman who believes her only value lies in her title as an attorney may question her worth the moment she steps away from the courtroom. That's the trap of mistaking function for identity. Function can be taken away. It can be reassigned, it can become obsolete, but identity, true intrinsic identity, is untouchable. It existed before any role was assigned and will remain even after the job is done. Identity is foundational, it is eternal. A tree does not stop being a tree when it sheds its leaves. A lion does not stop being a lion because it hasn't hunted in a day. Their identity is not tied to their actions at a specific moment. It is part of their nature. In the same way, human beings must understand that their value is not anchored in what they do but in who they are. This misunderstanding often starts early in life. Children are asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the answers are often professions. "I want to be a firefighter." "I want to be a nurse." No one asks children, "What kind of person do you want to become?" That question targets identity. It speaks to character, vision, and purpose. By shaping young minds to equate being with doing, we unintentionally teach them to chase titles rather than pursue truth. Over time, people grow up seeking to impress with what they do instead of discovering the essence of who they are. That creates a generation of performers, not purpose-driven individuals. When identity is rooted in being rather than doing, people can operate from a place of security. They are not shaken when jobs change, when seasons shift, or when roles evolve. A person who knows their identity is like a tree planted by water, unmoved by storms, unshaken by drought. Their confidence is not circumstantial. This is especially important in times of transition. Whether it's a career shift, a financial downturn, or a personal crisis, those who understand that identity is greater than function will not crumble under pressure. They recognize that their purpose is ongoing and their calling is not confined to a title on a business card. Purpose is the original blueprint that precedes every profession. Before a person steps into a role, earns a title, or receives a paycheck, there is a reason they exist, something deeper, more powerful, and more personal than any external achievement. Purpose is embedded in the core of every human being. It is not something that comes from a job description or a university degree. It's the internal compass that guides, shapes, and sustains a person beyond the limits of a career. Many people confuse their profession with their purpose, and as a result, they live within the boundaries of a role instead of the freedom of a calling. A profession is something you train for, something you acquire skills to perform. It's a function that serves society in a specific way. Purpose, however, is much broader. It speaks to your contribution to the world in alignment with your natural design. Your profession might be one way to express your purpose, but it is never the totality of it. You might work as a builder, but your purpose could be to create environments of safety and growth. You might be a counselor by profession, but your purpose is to restore hope to the broken. These are not job tasks, they are life assignments, and assignments are timeless. Purpose never expires, even if professions do. In a world of rapid change, where industries evolve and technologies replace roles, many people find themselves disoriented when their job no longer exists. But a person of purpose is never lost. Even if the platform changes, the mission continues. Purpose adapts, not because it is weak, but because it is resilient. A teacher can teach without a classroom, a leader can lead without a title, a healer can heal without a hospital. The core remains intact even when the context changes. This is why it is dangerous to anchor your identity to your profession. Careers can be taken, downsized, or automated, but no one can take your purpose. It is not subject to market demand. It is not controlled by external forces. It is divine, internal, and irrevocable. When you operate from purpose, your work becomes meaningful, not mechanical. You are not just going through the motions of a job. You are fulfilling a mandate. That sense of meaning brings energy, creativity, and endurance. It makes the difference between burnout and passion. People who know their purpose are not easily discouraged by failure or rejection. They understand that every experience, whether good or bad, can be used to advance their greater mission. When a person embraces their purpose before their profession, they gain a sense of direction that no position can provide. They begin to view work as an extension of their values, not just a means of income. This shift changes everything. It transforms how they show up, how they lead, and how they serve. Purpose gives weight to every action, no matter how small. It elevates ordinary tasks into meaningful contributions. It brings clarity in chaos and gives vision in seasons of confusion. When you introduce yourself by a title, you immediately give people permission to reduce you to a category. Titles are shortcuts the world uses to classify, but classification is not always accurate, and it's almost never complete. The moment you say, "I'm a banker," or "I'm a chef," or "I'm a writer," people form images in their minds, draw conclusions, and assign expectations. Whether those expectations are too high or too low, they are based on a limited view of who you are. That's the risk of allowing titles to speak on your behalf. They rarely tell the full story. They do not reflect your journey, your intent, your potential, or the layers of your character. They are shallow reflections of a much deeper reality, and the more society focuses on labeling people, the more it boxes them into rigid definitions that ignore their complexity and reduce their humanity to function. Titles are like containers. They hold something, but they are not the contents themselves. You can put gold in a wooden box or a diamond in a plain envelope. The value lies inside, not in the label on the outside. But the world often judges by the label, not the content. That is why many people are overlooked, not because they lack value, but because their container doesn't match the expectation of the observer. When you allow a title to define you, you are surrendering your narrative to other people's assumptions. You're allowing their interpretation to shape your identity. And in doing so, you limit your capacity because people treat you according to the box they've placed you in. Worse still, many people live their entire lives trying to fit into the boxes others have built for them. They spend energy maintaining an image instead of living their truth. They tailor their behavior to meet the definition of a role rather than expressing their full range of gifts and callings. This leads to frustration, to exhaustion, and to a slow erosion of authenticity. When someone has the potential to be a leader, a creator, a mentor, and a visionary, but only presents themselves as a manager, they are hiding 90% of who they are under the weight of a narrow title. That is not humility. It is confinement. There is also a danger in over-identifying with a title. When the title is taken away through layoffs, retirement, or life changes, people who built their identity on it often crumble. They no longer know who they are without that role because they never developed a deeper sense of self beyond the nameplate. But when you live beyond titles, you remain stable regardless of circumstance. You are not shaken when roles shift because your foundation is built on purpose, not position. Your essence does not evaporate with a job change. It continues because it was never tied to a box in the first place. Living beyond titles requires courage. It demands that you show up as your full self, not just the version that fits neatly into society's categories. It invites you to disrupt people's assumptions rather than conform to them. People naturally fear what they do not understand. When someone cannot fully grasp who you are, they tend to reduce you to something they can comprehend, and that often comes in the form of a label. They assign you a category, a title, or a role, not because they truly know you, but because it makes them feel more comfortable. It gives them a sense of control. This is a deeply ingrained behavior in human nature. From childhood, we're taught to name and define things as a way of making sense of the world. But when it comes to people, this habit becomes dangerous. It creates a false sense of familiarity with individuals we've barely begun to understand. People don't always take the time to explore depth. They are often more comfortable with assumptions than with the discomfort of mystery. This is why it's important not to give people easy definitions of who you are. When you tell someone what you do, especially if that role is common or traditionally understood, their mind stops exploring. Curiosity ends where assumption begins. The moment you say, "I'm a receptionist," or "I'm a salesperson," they believe they know what you are, what you're capable of, what you think, how you behave, but they don't. They're relating to a mental model, not a real person. And if you allow that to happen, you may find yourself limited by someone else's imagination instead of liberated by your own potential. People label what they don't understand not because they mean harm, but because they seek simplicity. Complexity threatens comfort. When you are multidimensional, when you carry layers of creativity, leadership, depth, or vision, it challenges others to look beyond surface-level definitions. That requires effort. Not everyone is willing to make that effort. So instead, they define you by the easiest, most visible part of your life, your job, your title, your appearance, your past. But none of these things capture the full weight of who you are. And if you keep feeding people only what's easy to grasp, they will never be challenged to see your true essence. It is essential to be intentional about how you present yourself, especially in a world where image often overshadows reality. Don't be quick to hand over simplified versions of your identity. Instead, lead with purpose. Speak in terms of impact, not tasks. Share your vision, not just your role. Let people wrestle with your complexity. Let them wonder. Let them be curious, because it is in that space of curiosity that real connection and respect are born. When people cannot quickly label you, they are forced to engage with you on a deeper level. They must listen, observe, and ask questions. That process builds meaningful relationships rooted in understanding rather than assumption. This also protects your self-concept. When you refuse to be defined by others' limited perceptions, you keep ownership of your identity. You are no longer at the mercy of stereotypes or categories. You are free to evolve, to expand, and to be fully you. ChatGPT said, "Your worth is not measured by your job, your achievements, or the recognition you receive from others. True worth originates from within, and it is not dependent on what you produce or perform." In a culture that glorifies success through outward accomplishments, it's easy to fall into the trap of believing that your value increases when you achieve something impressive or decreases when you fail to meet expectations. This creates a dangerous cycle where self-worth is tied to performance. If you win, you feel worthy. If you lose, you feel inadequate. But this mindset is fragile because it places your identity on a foundation that can be shaken by circumstances beyond your control. When your work becomes the sole measure of your value, you begin to seek validation from external sources, supervisors, peers, clients, audiences. You become dependent on applause, promotion, or praise to feel like you matter. But the problem with external validation is that it's inconsistent. One day, you might be celebrated, the next, forgotten. And if your sense of worth is built on that unstable platform, your confidence will rise and fall with people's opinions. That's not stability. That's emotional slavery. Real value is intrinsic. It comes from knowing that you were created with intention, that your life carries meaning regardless of how productive you are in any given moment. A tree is valuable even before it bears fruit. Its roots are deep, its structure strong, its presence vital to the ecosystem around it. In the same way, your presence has impact even before your efforts bring visible results. The danger of equating your value with your output is that you will eventually burn out trying to prove your worth through constant activity. You will chase one accomplishment after another, hoping the next one will finally make you feel complete. But no achievement can fill the void left by a lack of self-awareness and inner security. When you separate your work from your worth, something powerful happens. You gain the freedom to explore, to try, to fail, and to grow without fear of losing your identity. Mistakes no longer define you. Setbacks don't destroy you. You stop working to be seen and start working from a place of confidence. That shift changes your relationship with success. It no longer becomes a means of proving yourself, but a byproduct of living authentically. You become less anxious about outcomes and more focused on alignment, doing the work that reflects your values, your calling, and your passion. This also transforms how you relate to others. When you no longer see people as useful only when they're productive, you begin to value them for who they are, not just what they do. You extend grace more freely, both to others and to yourself. You recognize that a person's significance doesn't vanish when they take a step back from the spotlight. In fact, some of the most valuable growth happens in silence, in rest, in stillness, where the world isn't watching but identity is being shaped. In a world driven by noise, appearances, and constant self-promotion, we often forget that the most powerful form of communication is not what we say about ourselves, but the evidence we produce through our actions. People are drawn to fruit, not announcements. They trust what they can see, what they can feel, what they can experience. Letting your impact speak louder than your words means understanding that results have a language of their own, a language that is universal, undeniable, and far more persuasive than any speech or introduction. When you produce value, solve problems, and make a difference, you don't have to convince anyone of your worth. Your excellence will do the talking for you. Many people feel the need to explain themselves, to justify their dreams, to constantly market who they are and what they do, but the truth is, credibility is built through consistency, not conversation. You don't gain respect by telling people what you're capable of. You gain it by showing up and delivering time after time. Results cut through doubt. They silence criticism. They rise above misunderstanding. People may question your motives or your background, but when your work carries weight, it demands attention and earns trust. When you operate with integrity and produce outcomes, your name starts to carry authority, even in rooms you've never entered. It's tempting to seek approval before the work is done, to want recognition in the early stages, to explain the vision before the foundation has even been laid. But premature exposure can weaken the process. Growth happens best in the dark, away from the spotlight, in the hidden spaces where discipline, sacrifice, and refinement take place. A seed doesn't boast while buried underground. It simply grows, and in time its fruit is undeniable. Letting your results speak means embracing patience. It means allowing your journey to mature in silence until the impact is too large to ignore. This principle also applies to leadership. True leaders don't parade their titles. They serve with such effectiveness that their presence becomes essential. They don't demand loyalty. They earn it through character and performance. When your impact speaks, it builds influence that no amount of branding can replicate. People begin to associate your name with excellence, with reliability, with purpose. That kind of influence cannot be faked. It must be earned, and it is sustained by staying true to the work even when no one is watching. The beauty of letting your results speak is that it removes the pressure to perform for the sake of validation. You don't have to chase applause or worry about how you're being perceived. You can focus entirely on the mission. Excellence over time creates its own platform. The fruit of your labor becomes your message. The transformation you bring becomes your reputation, and that reputation, built on substance rather than noise, carries a strength that no campaign or pitch could ever match. In a society that places so much value on visibility, it's easy to believe that if you're not seen, you're not significant. But visibility is not the measure of worth. Some of the most powerful transformations happen in hidden places, far away from cameras, applause, or attention. A seed's most critical development takes place underground in darkness and isolation. No one praises the seed while it is growing roots, yet those roots are what eventually sustain the strength of the tree. In the same way, people often overlook the importance of the hidden seasons in their own lives. They rush to be seen, to be known, to be celebrated, not realizing that the time spent in silence and preparation is what shapes the depth of their character. When you are hidden, you are not being punished, you are being prepared. Growth in obscurity is necessary. It's where your intentions are purified, your discipline is tested, and your foundation is strengthened. It's easy to perform when the spotlight is on, but what truly reveals who you are is how you function when no one is clapping, when no one is affirming, and when no one is watching. That is the place where authenticity is forged. It's in the unseen hours of effort, consistency, and quiet dedication that true greatness is cultivated. Those who skip the hidden season often build shallow success, loud, visible, but lacking roots, and when the storms of life hit, they cannot withstand the pressure. There's a reason why some of the most enduring people in history didn't rise to influence overnight. They spent years in the shadows, learning, growing, failing, and maturing. They didn't rush the process because they understood that lasting impact requires depth, and depth takes time. The hidden season is where vision becomes clear, where values become solid, and where resilience is born. If you embrace it, you will emerge not just seen, but unshakable. But if you despise it, you may end up chasing visibility, while lacking the substance to sustain it. People often mistake attention for success, but they are not the same. Just because someone is visible doesn't mean they are valuable. Just because they are loud doesn't mean they are wise. There are voices in silence carrying more power than voices with microphones. There are people working in quiet corners of the world whose influence will outlast those currently trending. The world may not see them now, but in time their fruit will appear, and when it does, it won't need an introduction. It will speak for itself. Remaining hidden can be difficult, especially when you see others being recognized while you are being refined. But the path to long-term significance often requires temporary invisibility. It's not about being hidden forever, it's about being developed properly. What you build in silence will eventually echo loudly. What you construct in private will one day bless the public. But the root must come before the fruit, and preparation must come before presentation. When you shift your perspective from titles to the problems you were born to solve, your life takes on a new dimension of meaning. Titles are limited, often rigid, and defined by systems that were created to categorize people into specific roles. But problems are vast, dynamic, and ever-evolving. They represent the needs of the world, and every person is uniquely equipped to address a specific need. You were not just born to work a job or hold a position. You were born to be an answer to a question, a solution to a challenge, a light in a particular area of darkness. When you understand this, you stop chasing roles and start pursuing purpose. You realize that your life carries a unique assignment that cannot be reduced to a business card or a LinkedIn profile. There's a major difference between saying, "I am a teacher," and saying, "I help unlock the potential in others so they can rise into who they were created to be." The first is a role, the second is a mission. One is based on title, the other is rooted in impact. When you define yourself by the problem you solve, your work becomes meaningful no matter the platform. If your job changes, your mission doesn't. If your environment shifts, your assignment remains. That mindset frees you from the anxiety of titles and positions because you're no longer trying to fit into a predefined mold. You are walking in alignment with your calling, and calling transcends careers. This approach also helps people understand your value in a clearer and more compelling way. When you introduce yourself by what you fix, improve, build, or elevate, people are naturally drawn to you. You're no longer presenting a label. They hear purpose in your words. You become memorable because you are speaking from your identity, not just your industry. It also sets you apart in a world where most people define themselves by what they do, not why they do it. That distinction creates influence. It allows you to connect more deeply, build trust faster, and make your presence meaningful in every space you enter. Focusing on the problem you solve forces you to dig deep into your passions, your story, and your experiences. It brings clarity. Often, the problem you're meant to solve is tied to your personal history, something you've overcome, something you understand intuitively, something you care about deeply. That connection makes your work feel less like labor and more like a calling. It gives you endurance when things get tough because you're not just doing a job, you're fulfilling a mission. You become purpose-driven rather than position-driven, and that kind of internal compass is what leads to fulfillment. When you orient your life around solving a specific problem, you gain focus. You begin to align your choices, your learning, your relationships, and your goals around that mission. You stop spreading your energy thin trying to be everything and instead become excellent at what you were uniquely designed to do. Destiny doesn't seek permission, and it certainly doesn't wait for validation. When you are walking in alignment with your purpose, you don't need everyone's applause to confirm your path. Too many people delay their progress, waiting for others to recognize their potential before they step forward. They wait to be approved, endorsed, supported, or celebrated before taking action. But destiny doesn't operate on external validation. It responds to internal conviction. The truth is, some people will never see what's inside of you until it manifests. And by the time they do, it won't be because you told them. It will be because they can no longer deny the results. When you're grounded in purpose, you no longer feel the urge to constantly explain yourself. You become comfortable being misunderstood. You no longer shrink your vision to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You move with quiet confidence, knowing that what has been placed inside of you has value, whether or not others recognize it. That's the beauty of living with clarity. You no longer need applause to affirm your direction. You become unmoved by trends, gossip, or the crowd's opinion. Instead, you are anchored by an inner knowing that your steps are ordered, your path is intentional, and your life carries meaning. Waiting for validation is one of the quickest ways to delay your own growth. While you're waiting to be picked, others are building. While you're hoping for recognition, others are moving in silence, developing their craft, preparing for impact. If your confidence is dependent on being seen, you will constantly feel insecure. But when your confidence is rooted in purpose, you can walk boldly even when no one is watching. You understand that approval is not a prerequisite for progress. Some of the most impactful people began their journey in complete obscurity. They didn't wait for a crowd. They just followed the call. This doesn't mean that community, feedback, or support are not valuable. They are. But they should never be the engine of your movement. They are supplements, not sources. The source of your drive must come from within. That internal clarity fuels consistency, and consistency builds credibility. Over time, the fruit of your labor will attract the recognition your silence once hid. But by then, your identity won't be dependent on the attention because it was never built on it in the first place. You'll be grateful for the support, but not desperate for it. You'll appreciate the spotlight, but not require it to function. Living with this kind of resolve gives you power. It allows you to keep going when the crowd is silent. It gives you resilience in the face of opposition. It allows you to serve even when you're unseen. The most powerful movements in history didn't begin with mass approval. They began with vision, with conviction, and with one person refusing to wait for the world's permission. Destiny answers the call of those who walk in obedience, not those who wait to be noticed. There's a profound difference between showing people what you do and showing them who you are. What you do is observable, measurable, and often expected. It fits neatly into a box that others can understand. But who you are goes beyond function. It speaks to your values, your essence, and your unique design. When you live from the depth of who you are, your life becomes a message without needing constant explanation. People don't just see your actions, they feel your presence, your conviction, your integrity. You no longer live to impress, you live to express. You live as an embodiment of purpose, not a performance of roles. In today's culture, there is tremendous pressure to brand yourself by your output, to highlight your skills, list your accomplishments, and market your achievements as proof of worth. But the most impactful people are those who are consistent in character, not just competent in action. They lead with identity. They walk with authenticity. Their lives are rooted, not just polished. They don't rely on titles to gain influence. They let their truth speak, and that truth is revealed not in what they claim, but in how they show up, how they treat others, and how they live when no one is watching. Living from who you are means letting your core values Shape your decisions. It means aligning your work with your beliefs. It means that whether you're in a boardroom, on a stage, or in a quiet room with a friend, you are the same person. There is no need to switch roles or wear masks because you're not performing. You're being. That kind of consistency creates trust. People trust those who are stable in identity. They may admire talent, but they follow character. And character comes from knowing who you are beyond what you do. When you lead with identity, opportunities are attracted to you, not because you're chasing them, but because your authenticity makes you magnetic. People can sense when someone is rooted in purpose. They're drawn to it because it's rare. In a world filled with personas, the genuine person stands out without needing to compete. This authenticity builds a reputation that travels further than any title can carry. It opens doors not by force, but by favor. It creates relationships that are meaningful, not transactional. Understanding who you are also protects you from being shaped by external expectations. You're no longer swayed by trends, criticism, or the need to conform. You make decisions from a place of clarity, not insecurity. You invest in what matters, not just what's visible. You find fulfillment in alignment, not just in attention. This kind of living brings peace. It quiets the noise of comparison and gives you the freedom to grow in your own lane, at your own pace, with your own voice. The people who make the greatest impact in this world are not always the loudest or the most decorated. They are the ones who understand the power of being before doing. They live as a reflection of something deeper, and through that depth, they change everything around them.